There are exercises for every scale. So if you are actively depressed, for example, and you really aren't seeing any evidence of your own virtues, you're caught in this vicious cycle of, being in a bad mood, right? That making you not want to go out and do things, that making you not have a positive view of yourself, and that continuing to in the cycle of not making you in a good mood. You have to kind of claw your way out of this cycle. And one of the most proven effective methods for doing this is called behavioral activation, where you essentially go out and create a list of activities you're going to do every day, starting with baby steps. I mean, every day I'm going to get out of bed and take a shower, for example. Or building off of that, once you got that down, every day I'm going to go for a walk and call a friend or something. All of these, the way I interpret it, is that all of these gradually increase the amount of virtue that you are bringing out in your behaviors and giving yourself evidence of. Crucially, you have to be able to see what you're good at in order to approve of yourself and feel good about yourself.
That's really hard for some people. I mean, if you're in the midst of depression, you're talking about the idea of like pulling yourself up by your bootstraps in a way, like,
right.
Telling someone to do something, if you're depressed, to do something so that you're less depressed.
Right.
It's like very easy to say when you're someone else looking at the person that's suffering. But when you're in the midst of suffering, picking up the book to look at the graph that tells you that, or is, where does that inspiration come from? Like, how does someone get that to arise without a reference point, without an anchor to get leverage off of? That's a real challenge, which ultimately probably speaks to a bigger societal thing where people that need support from their community, their tribe, whatever, we're not structuring society well enough where that's provided enough.
Yeah, absolutely. It is incredibly difficult. It's hard to empathize with it if you're not depressed, but getting out of bed can feel like lifting a boulder to someone who is. And so two things about it. I think the beauty of behavioral activation is that, one, people often feel like that there are a lot of things they have to be doing. And again, like we talked about, that can result in analysis paralysis and sort of dilute their motivation. And so just telling them, this is what you need to do, this is all you need to do, just do the 2 items on your activity schedule, I think that will make it more likely that you're actually going to do it. And 2, the fact that you can break this down incrementally and go in baby steps. So no matter where you're at, you are only ever challenging yourself a little bit. So if you're already, getting up and cleaning your room every day, you're only adding one additional layer to that at each point. And only when you've mastered that do you add another one until you're essentially back to normal functioning and beyond, potentially. So between the singular focus and the baby steps, I think it gives a way for people who don't feel like they can do anything to very gradually get to where they can do more and more.
It's a very analytical process, the way you break it down.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting you say that, because the other thing I tell people to do, essentially, if you're depressed because you're actually not taking these actions that align with your values, then I think behavioral activation is going to be the best approach. If you're depressed because you are taking these actions and everyone else around you can see it, but you're not seeing it for some reason, you're not receiving the signal of those virtues, then there are probably distorted beliefs sort of resulting in a problem there. And that's when cognitive restructuring, which is the really analytical approach, is going to be more needed, right? That's kind of like what we talked about in the first book, going through and identifying your distorted beliefs and restructuring them so that they work with your emotions better.
Well, that's probably a really common thing, having a distorted belief that might be leading you to, as you said earlier, like to chase the carrot, to look for happiness in somewhere where it isn't, or whatever. But those are pretty deep embedded in us, and becoming part of our software at a very young age, whether it's as a result of you know trauma or whatever drove the subconscious to believe a certain thing about yourself. That's like a big hurdle to overcome, that's probably underlying a lot of the actions and behaviors that people wind up like deploying in their life that don't align with what they actually value. And it also might be because they don't really take the time to identify what they value. I mean, that's not
Oh,
something that we you get in like the school system when you're going through the generic school system. You're not taking time outs to periodically check in with the things that are important to you.
oh yeah, and a lot of what motivates my work is trying to create the things that I think should already be in the, early school system. I made this deck of introspection cards because no one makes you ask the questions that I think we should all be sort of asking ourselves. So it's sort of like take a card with you on a walk, take your little pocket-sized journal and answer one question every day, and it sort of builds your understanding of yourself and your values and who you admire, and these things walks you gradually through this process of introspection. But I also think a big part of that, I do think everyone should learn about cognitive therapy. I don't think it's just a therapy for people who are struggling with mental illness. I think it's kind of a basic fundamental skill, and Mind Over Mood and Feeling Good are both great books specifically about that. But I also think one of the best ways to override deeply held beliefs is not just kind of sitting around and examining them, but proving it to yourself, proving yourself wrong. And that's why a big part of both depression and anxiety treatment is about going out and running experiments in your life, testing hypotheses, proving to yourself, oh, this is a distorted belief, because look, it's not responding the way I predicted. I thought people would, make fun of me if I said this, and that's been guiding a lot of my actions, but actually people respond really open and compassionately when I say this. So going out and actually proving to yourself can be more powerful than just reworking the beliefs with a pen and paper. If you're really depressed, what you need to do is, it's called behavioral activation. It's a process where you basically simply set a daily activity schedule and gradually work more activity and action into your daily schedule in baby steps. Like initially you're just saying, I'm just going to get out of bed and shower each day, and then you're saying, okay, well, I've got that down, I'm gonna take a shower and clean my room and go on a walk. And as you work your way up, you find ways to integrate more of those virtues into it. So you're saying, I'm going to create art because creativity is one of my strengths. I'm going to call a friend and talk them through some of their struggles because compassion is one of my strengths. And so as you work your way up, you find more and more sort of idiosyncratic ways that are unique to you for bringing out the highest expression of those virtues as you can. And eventually you're designing, new vessels for these strengths. Like I feel like I've done with designing the mind and creating new ways that wouldn't necessarily be possible through a traditional job or things like that, to integrate all these different strengths and passions.
So yeah, no, I really like that idea where I've heard this before where yeah, you got to take like baby steps to kind of build yourself up, first start with like say cleaning your room, and then take a shower, maybe go for a walk, maybe, and then like at some point go to the gym, and kind of like build yourself up, get mentally good, and then start, setting those bigger goals, like, maybe I don't know, if you want to become a lawyer, go to school or something.
Yeah. No, that's a good.
Artificially with antidepressants, you might feel good a little bit, but then if you're not doing things that make you admire yourself, create a strong identity, you're just going to feel bad again right away.
Exactly. And that's why, another tactic known as behavioral activation by some studies works even better than CBT, and it certainly outperforms antidepressants. It seems so simple and so easy that it wouldn't work, but it actually really does. It essentially is just getting you to go out and do things even if you don't feel like it, and specifically doing things that gradually work towards embodying your values, starting small and climbing your way up gradually until you are doing things every day that you're actually proud of yourself for. This is a really huge, underrated practice, I think, and there's a lot of data suggesting it works as well as just about anything. There's reason to think it might even be a big part of why exercise seems to work so well. It's not just that you're, doing something that's good for your body. It's that you're doing something that's good for your own self-perception. You are giving yourself a reason to admire your own discipline. If you're going out and working out, or it could be reading a book or going on a walk, all these things that give you reason to see, oh, I am an admirable person. I do have these traits that I admire. But I would advise first and foremost to take the behavioral activation approach. And really, this goes all the way up. It starts at clinical depression, and really no matter where you're at, even if you're generally satisfied in your life, you can still apply this principle of behavioral activation. But essentially, you want to break that cycle so that no matter how you feel, you make yourself go out and actually do things that at least to some degree show you what kind of person you are and how that aligns with your values. So if you are, severely depressed and you're struggling to get out of bed each day, you probably feel like there is a million things you need to be doing that you just can't. Well, replace those million things with one thing or maybe two each day. You're going to get out of bed. You're going to take a shower, right? If you're a little improved from there, you can say, okay, each day I'm going to get out of bed, take a shower, clean up my room and do some dishes. And then you can start introducing things that bring out more of these admirable behaviors. You can start introducing, okay, I'm going to call a friend for 30 minutes every day, even though I don't feel like it. I'm going to go on a hike, even though I'd rather stay in bed. I'm going to make myself stick to this schedule every day. And gradually, you sort of claw your way out of this vicious cycle, and you can create a virtuous cycle in its place. You can get to a place where your positive mood is making you want to go out and do things, which is making you feel great about yourself, and so on. The cycle continues. And so really, we want to extend this all the way up to the point of asking, okay, I'm already in a great place. I'm in a great mood, but I want to go even higher. How can I bring even more of my virtues together and bring them to a higher level than they've ever been before?
Once we identify the big rocks, the big cognitive emotional biases and behaviors that need to be changed, now what?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of opportunity for positive growth. Some of this is sort of framed around find the negative thing. And that's a big part of what the new book is centered around. It's going beyond examining negative sort of micro habits that are affecting you and saying, how can you really grow? How can you become the best version of yourself and the self that you admire most? And so that is a big part of what I put forward and recommend for just growing and going beyond that. There's a practice known as behavioral activation that I mentioned. And, this is a really stupid, simple practice that's easy to overlook, but it performs better than any antidepressant. And that is literally just building an activity schedule for yourself that is slightly more challenging, slightly more fulfilling, brings slightly more pleasure or mastery into your life than you were doing before. And essentially incrementally increasing that until you're living more and more according to your values, and you've climbed out of this vicious cycle that is depression. But I argue in that book too that behavioral activation and becoming who you are essentially one thing. We call it behavioral activation when it's on the very bottom, when you are very depressed and you're not taking any behaviors that make you proud of who you are. But at the highest level, it's essentially the same thing. It's just doing it in a way that promotes deep flourishing and going beyond just regular, contentedness or happiness. And
at the base level, we call it healing. At the higher level, we call it peak performance.
Exactly.
Activation. Yeah.
Exactly.
Same principles, just applied at a different scale.
Completely. And I think as you go up that scale, it becomes more and more idiosyncratic. At the bottom of the scale, you can say just getting out of bed and taking a shower each day is going to give you, some reason to approve of yourself, right? Going on a walk, exercising, reading, that takes you a little higher. And then as you get up towards the top, you have to start asking, what vessel can I design for 7 of my top unique strengths where I can bring them all together into one place? And if you do that, it's not going to look like anything anyone else is really doing,
right.
Because
that becomes the morning ritual, which combines journaling, meditation, the sauna, the cold plunge, and
Yeah. And for
and a
me,
CrossFit workout.
yeah, for me, I see it as, designing the mind. I've essentially built this vessel for myself that brings everything I'm good at and interested in into one place. I'm bringing more of my personal virtues out through this than I've ever been able to do through anything else in my life. So it's extremely fulfilling because it does give me this unique opportunity to do what I'm good at every day.
Mm-hmm.